This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the best way to make an amazing website. When I first got the iPhone 12 mini into my hands, I was intrigued. It was incredibly small and lightweight, yet at the same time really premium, so I was really excited to test it out and see if I can finally swap over to a smaller phone. Unfortunately, after 2 months, I can't really recommend this phone for most people, and there's more than a few reasons to spend that little bit more and get the iPhone 12. Or maybe hold off altogether and wait for the iPhone 13 mini if Apple even makes one, which we'll talk about. With that said, there are so many things that I absolutely love about this phone and reasons that I want to keep using it, but there's also a few issues that I've experienced, one of them being so massive that it is just not worth me using anymore, even if I do love the size and weight. Let's start out with the best thing about the iPhone 12 mini, and that is the size. Now I knew it was going to be small, but you really don't understand what it's like unless you get to hold it in your hand, and of course if you have maybe say an iPhone 5 or 5S. Now I'm used to using large phones, but even then I was just tempted to keep using it. So if you're somebody that has an older iPhone and you love the size, the iPhone 12 mini is actually smaller and lighter than the 4.7-inch iPhones, including the new SE, while at the same time the display is a fair bit larger as well. For those of you that are coming from one of those iPhone 5s, the 12 mini is just slightly larger and heavier, but of course its design now has circled back to the square chassis and it's actually slightly thinner as well. So if you like how your old phones feel, you will love this one. Comfort wise, comparing it to the iPhone 12, yeah, it is definitely more comfortable side by side, but most people will get used to that larger size and then they'll have no issues with it. Now there's one huge advantage that the mini has over the other 12 models in terms of its size, and that is that it is perfect for Apple's MagSafe wallet. I've tested the wallet on all of the new iPhone 12s, and by far the best phone for the wallet is the mini. Now a lot of reviewers tested the wallet and they complained about it, and that's because it just doesn't work very well on the other phones, especially with the iPhone 12 Pro Max. It constantly twists and slides around, unable to stay secure on the phone. But with the mini on the other hand, the wallet held very well since the sides and bottom match up perfectly, so it never twists off center. Not only that, but it also feels super comfortable to hold with the wallet, unlike on the 12 Pro Max where it feels kind of weird because of the extra gaps on the sides. Now let's talk about that really nice full screen display. The mini has that 5.4 inches, which is a really nice upgrade from the older 4.7 to maybe 4-inch iPhones. So not only are you getting a smaller phone compared to the 4.7, but also a more efficient one, getting a full screen display that doesn't waste space with huge bezels. Now along with that, the mini actually has Apple's most detailed display. Because the display is smaller than the other 12s, its pixels are just more packed together, which results in the mini having 476 ppi, while the 12 Pro Max has 458. And in case you're curious, the iPhone SE has 326. Now considering the small display compared to the other 12s, it's a common worry that you wouldn't have as much screen real estate as on the larger phones when you're watching websites or reading, things like that. But honestly, that wasn't an issue for optimized websites. You can see almost just as much as you can on the 12 Pro Max. Everything is just a little bit smaller. Now before I get into the two issues that I have with the display specifically, let me give a shout out to the sponsor of this video, Squarespace. If you've been thinking about making your own website, Squarespace is seriously the best way to go. We've built multiple websites and you can too with literally no web making experience. You just choose a template, customize blocks of text and images, and easily move them around. It's incredibly simple, affordable, and ours have been running flawlessly for years now, bringing in new clients thanks to its built-in SEO tools. So whether you're making a website for a small business or for literally anything else, go to squarespace.com/maxtech for a free trial or use our custom link down below, and when you're ready to launch, you will save 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. One issue that I've been dealing with is constantly making typos since the phone screen is so small and my fingers are so big. And the other issue with the display being so small is that gaming on this phone is very difficult and kind of annoying. It's a lot harder to see because everything is so small, and not only that, but my fingers take up so much room on that display. Let's just say that the iPhone 12 is much better for gaming and typing, but of course, if you're used to a small phone already, that shouldn't be an issue. Now, one thing that really surprised me with this phone is its performance and thermals. When I really pushed it, it never got hot like the Max did. On the Max, after about a half hour of gaming at full settings, it would overheat and then the screen would turn down and then would lock into about half brightness until it cools down. But surprisingly, that never once happened on the Mini. And that performance is thanks to the insanely powerful 5nm A14. The CPU and graphics performance is absolutely crazy, and it's the same exact on the Mini as on that 12 Pro Max. The only slight difference in performance is RAM, with the Mini having 4GB instead of 6, but to be honest, I didn't really notice a difference. Maybe that's because iOS is just a lot more efficient with the latest versions, or maybe because I just didn't end up using my iPhone 12 as much as I would with the larger ones, which could be a good thing for some of you. One reason for that is because the screen is quite small, but the other reason are the speakers. They are great. Now, I wasn't expecting them to sound as good as the 12 Pro Max, but I didn't think they would be the same as the iPhone SE and a fair bit worse than the iPhone 12. Not only does the quality sound worse in general, but it's also quieter, the mids are really lacking, and the bass is pretty much non-existent. Have a listen for yourself. Now, I know for some of you this won't matter, but the two biggest things that I do on my phone is write messages and emails and then watch YouTube videos. So since the screen is smaller and the speakers are a lot weaker, I just found myself using it much less, and I would go and grab a laptop or an iPad. With that said, that's not what really messed up my experience with it, and the battery life didn't either. That was a huge worry for me and many others before I got this phone, but I was pleasantly surprised. Based on my real world use with 5G enabled, I expected the battery to be dead by 3 p.m., but every day it ended up lasting until 5 or even 6 p.m., and I do push my phones fairly hard. The iPhone 12 would typically die at 6 to 7 p.m., so it only lasted about an hour more than this one, and comparing to my 12 Pro Max, well, that thing lasted all day up until 10 or 11 p.m., so the Mini can't really match up there, but that also has a 60% larger battery. And if you're somebody with an iPhone SE, you'll get about 1 to 2 more hours of screen on time with the Mini, and the same thing goes with older iPhones that have older worn out batteries. It's gonna be a good improvement for you. Now, to be honest, this makes no difference for me because if I have to top off during the day, it doesn't matter if it's an hour earlier or later. So if you're worried about battery life, honestly, don't be. And the same thing goes for camera quality. Thankfully, Apple didn't cheap out, and even though the 12 Mini costs $100 less than the 12, we still have dual rear cameras and the same exact front-facing one. That also means that the quality is exactly the same as the 12 Pro other than not having that zoom camera. But honestly, an ultra-wide camera is much more useful, and for the most part, you're not missing much. Photo quality went up dramatically this year, with nighttime photos being possible with the front-facing camera, which makes shots go from being dark or ugly to nice-looking shots, and ultra-wide photos went from a blurry mess to some amazing looking images. If you want to see the few details between the camera systems on the 12 Mini, the 12, 12 Pro, and the high-end 12 Pro Max model, I actually did a very in-depth camera comparison showing every single camera difference, which you can watch after this video. I'll leave a link down below. Now I want to finally get into the big deal breaker about this phone that caused me enough frustration that I could no longer deal with it, and I need to use one of the larger phones. And that is connection speed and reception. Speed's got a huge boost this year with the 12s compared to the 11s, thanks to Apple using the super fast Snapdragon X55 modem with 5G. For example, outside of my church, the place where I struggled the most with reception, I would get about 6 megabit per second download and 0.3 upload on my 11 Pro Max. Now, testing the speeds on the regular 12 and the 12 Pro, which have the same exact setup, I would get 38 megabit per second download and 2 megabit per second upload. That is over 6 times faster. Now, inside of my church, I would get no service at all with the 11 Pro, but I would actually get 1 to 2 bars with the iPhone 12s. However, with the 12 Mini, this isn't the case. I get zero service inside the building, nothing. And that is extremely frustrating. And outside, it is still a fair bit slower than the iPhone 12. Now, I'm not sure why this is because they're very similar, but I did go back and forth a few times and it definitely is caused by this phone. Overall, this has been noticeable in multiple places across town, which is a huge deal breaker for me because I need to have service. Now, last year with the iPhone 11, there was nothing I could do and I was stuck with what I had. But this year, knowing that the 12 and 12 Pros and then the 12 Pro Max can give me service in places where I previously didn't have it, there's just no way that I could stick to using the mini. So even though I love the size, because of those reasons, I have a hard time recommending this unless you absolutely have to have the smallest size. And in those cases, it really seems like not many people actually do. You see, people have been asking for a smaller phone like the iPhone 5 for years now, but nobody really thought or expected Apple to listen and deliver. When Apple updated the SE to the Gen 2 with the updated A13 chip, it was a big surprise and people were happy. However, not that much changed other than that chip, and people wanted to get a bigger upgrade. I think that Apple took a huge risk making this phone, and while people were asking for it, not nearly as many people actually ended up buying one. If we look around at sales, the iPhone 12 lineup accounted for about 76% of iPhones sold during October and November, which is better than the 11s did last year, with the regular 12s making up about 27%, so most of that portion. Both the iPhone 12 Pro and the Pro Max each sold about 20%. However, the 12 mini only accounted for 6% of total sales, which was shockingly low to me because it's the first time that Apple is offering such a small phone for all those people that are asking it while keeping the performance and the camera the same as the iPhone 12 and dropping the price by $100. My only guess is that most people thought that the regular 12 was a better buy, even if it costs more, and after the last 2 months, I would definitely agree, and I actually wonder if Apple will ever make an iPhone 13 mini, or they're just gonna keep selling this one for multiple years as they have done with the SEs. Now, despite all of that, the 12 mini is still a nice phone, and I would recommend it if you really need a tiny one, but I think that most people should just go for an iPhone 12 instead, but you guys go ahead and let me know what you think down below. This has been Max. Click that circle above to help us reach our goal of 600K subs before March, which is our 2-year mark. That would be absolutely amazing. Check out one of those great videos right over there, and I will see you in the next one.